Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you how I am speed painting my Warhammer army. These are of course the Kruleboy Orruks from Games Workshop. I got these from the Dominion box and they've been sitting grey for a while. So I decided let's find a nice quick way of getting them on the battlefield with minimal steps, speed painting them by just doing a little technique beforehand. If you're aware of the Slapchop technique, underpainting, dry brush, zenithal, whatever you want to call it, I'm doing it with a bit of a twist. I'm calling this maybe swampy contrast, for lack of a better term. But it comes out with a really nice finish. As you can see, gives a bit of a murkiness and has a lot of detail all over with very minimal steps and very quick turnaround time. So let's get started. I've got my Kruleboyz, I've got my cat. Let me show you what my plan is here. The foundation of this technique starts with a Zandri dust base coat. This is very odd for a contrast method because normally for contrast you want something white, but I've discovered this works really well for a nice swampy finish. So after spraying with Zandri dust, I'm going to take my secret weapon, and that is Aggaros Earthshade, and I'm going to apply this all over my miniatures. With a fairly large brush, quite loaded up, I'm going to go around and apply this all over, getting into all of those nooks and crannies. See, this is exactly what I want. I want that shading between all the different folds of fabric, between all the different parts where his loincloth meets his skin. I'm going to go all over here. I will make sure that nothing pulls. That is a very good example of what I don't want. I don't want pooling. So I'll just slurp it up my brush and move that somewhere else. With that Aggaros Earthshade applied, I now have some very nice dark recess shading. There's one more thing I need to do before I can get started. The next step of the prep work is to have some highlights. So I have here some Wrack white. It's a dry brush paint. It's a white with a tiny bit of creaminess to it, which I find is perfect for this. So I got some of that on a very old makeup brush. I got this like for next to nothing at a chemist. It's super cheap. Put some paint on there, worked into the bristles, and now I'm going to dry brush over to pick out the highlightable edges. So what I'll end up with at the end of this step is the edge highlights basically done, the recess shading done, and a nice Zandri dust mid-tone for everything else. And with that done, all the prep work is finished. What I have now here is Zandri dust mid-tone, Wrack white highlight, and Aggaros Earthshade in the recesses, and this will provide a great foundation for the speed painting with contrast. With all of that prep work done, it's now time for the fun part, and that is using contrast paints to speed paint my way through. The reason for this is, now that we've got all of the shadows and the highlights done, we're effectively just going to be tinting it with contrast. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to start off by painting the flesh, and I'm not going to use Orc flesh contrast paint because this is very dark. I actually prefer Plaguebearer flesh for this. I'll show you why. I've got my brush here. And if I apply that just in one semi-thick coat all over, you'll see the color is a rather sickly green by default. However, since I'm painting it over this almost sandy hue I've got already, what it ends up being is a really murky, gross green skin tone that I honestly love for my Kruleboyz. That there is what I want to show you. Right now I've got brown recesses, a normal green mid-tone, and a light green highlight. So I've got 5 minis here so that I can speed paint my way through. I'm going to go along and pick out the skin for all 5 of them with Plaguebearer flesh. I'm now going to move on to the next part that's quite a big focal area, and that is their scare shields. I've got here on my palette some Blood Angels Red. This is a very nice, deep, vibrant red, so it will cover very nicely, and this will make those shields really pop out. These shields are greatly designed with all their little recesses. Having gone over with a dry brush, it's going to make it be very pronounced. I will do something though, and that is ensure that I don't go over these little rivets, because I will paint those differently a little bit later. One more thing to note, I'm batch painting a few of these now, but when I'm painting the leader, which is this guy here, he's got a little hair tufty thing. This little, I don't know what this is. This little thing here. I'm going to paint that red as well to make it fairly obvious that he's the one in charge. That red is nice and dry now. You can see how vibrant that is, but it still has that nice grimy in the recesses. I'm moving on now to some wildwood. And this is a very dark brown, so I'm going to use it quite sparingly. I'm actually only going to use this for any actual wooden details. So the most common is all of the actual stick parts of the weapons, the grabby bits. So any wooden pieces I'll do. After that, I'll have a nice dark brown on the weapons. It's actually not overly dark, it still has those highlights if I can get it into focus there. And next on, we're going to move on to the metal. I have here some Basilicanum grey. Now, a lot of people, when painting with contrast, will use metallic paints for the metals. Something like Lead Belcher is perfect here. Me, however, I'm going to continue on with contrast for the simple fact that I don't think my Kruleboyz will have very shiny metal. I think it will be very dark and grimy, and they may actually darken it in order to sneak up on enemies and not have it glint in the sunlight. So for this, Basilicanum grey is perfect. I have some on my brush here. Now I'll apply this to anywhere that's metal. So a good starting point is all of the spears, seeing as I'm currently painting the spearmen of the Kruleboyz. And you'll see it does pull away from those edges and make that raised line look quite sharp. So in doing that, don't forget there's the end of the spear as well. Additionally, a lot of their scare shields will have these little rivets. So all of these I'll go along and I'll just dab on a little bit of Basilicanum grey onto these rivets. Let's get a bit more onto my brush there. So dab that on there. Any spikes if they have. This guy has a helmet that I will do in the same color. Now that all my Gutrippaz are looking uniformly ununiform, they all have the same colors, the same base coat, the weapons are done, I now get to have some fun. When I say uniformly ununiform, what I mean is if you look at them, they've got rags all over the place. So I don't want to use everything identical where rag top left is this color, rag top right is that color. So the reason why I have 5 of them here is I've grabbed 3 different contrast paints. I've got here some Gore-Grunta fur, which is a nice warm brown. I've got some Aggaros dunes, which is a nice sandy color. And I've got some skeleton horde, which is nice and bony. So I put them on my palette here, and I'm going to start off with some Gore-Grunta fur. And for each of these, I'm going to pick a random spot and paint that in. I will leave all the stitches to the best of my ability. This is a speed paint, so if I'm a bit sloppy, I don't mind. Oh, I really do love this color. It's so warm and vibrant. And I'm going to paint that in on this guy. And then while I've got this paint in my brush, I'll grab the next one and pick a spot, let's say over here, and paint that in. And similarly, just then grab another boy and pick another spot for him, let's say the spot on this side. I'll then grab the next color and do a similar approach where I do another piece on Orc number 1, another piece on Orc number 2, and so on and so forth. You know what, let's add another color into the mix. I have here some Snakebite leather, and this will introduce another tone into the browns. Look at those browns, those leathers, those different tans. Actually has a really nice effect, and because of that undercoat, it all looks very grimy and dirty. And if you look at all the others, they look similar enough without looking identical, which is exactly what I wanted. The other thing you'll notice is that I've left all of the, where I could, the stitches clear, white, well, Zandri dust, which is what I want to sort of, don't want to paint in all those little stitches. I'm speed painting here. However, there's the matter of these wraps on the feet, on the belt, and behind the shield, as well as the leader's got one below the shield there. And I want to do something nice and different there, and this may be controversial. If you're following on at home like a tutorial, you might want a different color, but me, I want a splash rather of blue. I've got here some Aethermatic blue, which is nice and bright and just like a magical blue. So I've got some on my brush here, and I'm going to use this for this little part under the shield here, just to give it a little bit of extra color variation. And at the same time, because I don't want just in one place, anywhere there's a wrap. So these wraps over there, and this blue will still look dirty because of that undercoat. That is the nice thing about this. There's the wrap on the feet there. Again, if you would rather do this in a leather color or like a red fleshy tone, could even look nice for these wraps, or a tan similar to the clothing. After painting all those browns and leathers for the clothing, I wanted something a bit different. With that blue applied, I did need to go over some twice in a few places. It is a very light blue, but if you look at these models, I am happy with them. They've got the nice bright red to draw your attention. They've got that sickly green. They've got various shades of brown, and that blue just breaks it up. So at this point, I'm happy to call the paint job of these models done. The only thing left to do is to base them. Basing depends on your army. I'll show you how I base my armies. And there we have it. With minimal steps, my Kruleboyz are ready. As you can see, I batch painted them to make them go even faster. And yeah, this is going to be my new way of painting this army. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them down below. This is, of course, also my first official Games Workshop mini painting video. So if you like this, want to see more, let me know. If you want to go back to 3D printed ones, let me know as well. If you want to just say, hi, where's the cat? Do that too. Until next time, cheers.